Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
First of all, let me thank you, Samyak, for inviting me to address your group. As I understand, you have a group of people who are focused primarily on psychology. And so today I titled my address as The Psychology of Divine and Demoniac. And as everybody may know, that the world is in a very difficult, awkward situation today, and many people give their opinion that this is a battle between good and evil. And indeed, I agree with that assessment. And so I want to speak about demoniac or evil and the psychology thereof. Let me say that also I'm going to be speaking from one of my books, the book's Lessons in Spiritual Economics from the Bhagavad-Gita. And this is one chapter, The Divine and Demonic Consciousness, one chapter of that book. That book is available online, and we'll put a link in the box later. The first thing is to understand, that many psychologists have studied the question of evil and from a psychological perspective. However, the question is actually properly addressed from a spiritual perspective. And to my knowledge, the only psychologist that has worked from that point of view is Scott Peck, with his book, People of the Lie. Anyway, so we're going to, I'm going to speak about it from the spiritual perspective. And first, I'm going to begin from the perspective, or let's say we're going to be looking at the demonic side. And we do that because we need to understand the problem before we can properly understand the solution. So, to begin with, I want to give a little quote about this because I think it's safe to say in the present age that evil is not something that's very well understood by people. And here's Carl Jung, of course, very famous psychologist, and what he wrote about the subject, he said, "The wolf in sheep's clothing now goes about whispering in our ear that evil is nothing but a misunderstanding of good and an effective instrument of progress. We think that the world of darkness has thus been abolished for good and all, but nobody realizes what a poisoning this is of man's soul." So it's a very real component of modern society, evil or demonic psychology. And so it's very important to understand it. And I want to make the point that this is not a psychological problem, but a spiritual problem when it is properly understood. So to begin with, Lord Krishna, he states in Bhagavad-Gita that everyone follows my path in all respects. So Krishna, of course, is God. And he says, everyone follows my path. What does that mean? Well, we all know that a path has two directions, to and from. And for everyone in all of creation, we are on that path and we can go towards God or away from God. Going towards God is actually the goal of human life. We have that prerogative. We have free will, and we can make that choice to go toward God and lift ourselves up, or we can choose to go away from God, to ignore God, and even try to be God ourselves, which is actually what the source of the problem is. In my remarks today, I'm going to be quoting from three psychologists that are very well known: Carl Jung, Erich Fromm, and Scott Peck. Erich Fromm, he studied evil from the perspective of, from observing rather, the Third Reich and their behaviors, their activities, and what they were doing. He wrote 3 books on the subject. Scott Peck, of course, as I mentioned, he wrote the book The People of the Lie, and then there's others who have also written books about the evil personality. In looking at this, we're going to look at 3 basic orientations: necrophiles, meaning persons who are in love with everything that's dead; malignant narcissists; and psychopaths. These are 3 orientations of evil that are found in the psychological setting. Scott Peck, he was not like all psychologists trained in university. He didn't have any particular let's say orientation towards evil, but what he found when he got into his clinical practice is that there are in fact people who are evil, and as a result of that practice, he studied it further and wrote that book, People of the Lie. So, people follow my path in all respects, Krishna says, towards and away from God. As we go toward God, we understand who we are in relationship to the Supreme. We understand that we are not supreme, that Krishna or God is supreme. And we are subordinate to him in every respect. However, in this material world, people have the choice to ignore God and even to think that they are God. And as we go on the path in the other direction, people become more and more self-absorbed. They want to become the center of everything. They want to be God themselves. This, in fact, is what leads people towards evil. In fact, this could be the definition of evil, to try to be God oneself. People sometimes ask, well, where does evil come from? If God created everything, did God create evil? And the answer to that is no. We create evil. And an example of that is just as if we're in the sunshine, we're standing out on a sunny day, we can turn toward the sun or away from the sun. Turning away from the sun, we see a shadow. Who created the shadow? We could say, oh, the sun created the shadow, but no, it's us. We see the shadow by turning away from God. So by turning away from God, we become more and more self-absorbed. We want to become God ourselves. And so the narcissist, this is, of course, this is a word that means people who are self-absorbed. And so of narcissism, there's 2 basic kinds. There's benign narcissism, where people are absorbed. They think they're special based on their accomplishments. What did they do? They did something special. Mark Spitz, what did he earn? Something like 25 gold medals in the Olympics. Very special person. So people like that, they can become very proud of themselves. They did something special. And people do become narcissistic in many ways, but in this benign form, there's a possibility of overcoming that. There's a corrective element that's present. However, there's another form of narcissism which lacks that corrective element, and that is called malignant narcissism. And malignant narcissism is a particular way of, it's based on what a person has, their looks or their money, their wealth, something like that. Because I am already great of something that I have, I don't need to qualify myself. There's nothing that I need to do. I'm already perfect. And this is a orientation of that's very much connected with evil. Psychologist Otto Kernberg, he explained that malignant narcissism is very much connected with evil and with a number of clinical forms that evil takes. And as I explain these attributes of the evil personality, look and see what's going on in the world and see if you can see how these are actually being expressed either by political or other kind of leaders in the world. And I think it becomes very clear that we do see these types of psychology in some of the political leaders. So, malignant narcissists, they take pleasure and enjoyment in controlling others and making them suffer, in destroying them, or using their trust and confidence to exploit them. Now, this is not normal human psychology. Human beings don't do this. You've got a person, he takes others' trust and confidence and uses that to exploit them and control them or even destroy them. Now, do we see that going on today? People getting locked down for what reason? The statistics are in by now, and we know that locking people down, in fact, harms them. That so-called cure is worse than the disease. Or social distancing, or even wearing a face mask. These things, they're not really helping anything, but they make people suffer, and they're using people's trust. People trust authorities, and they're using that trust to exploit them. So, now let's go and look at the necrophile. Necrophile is a person who is in love with death, or everything that's dead. The necrophile has an attraction to dead matter. And this has actually become the orientation of our entire society, because it's simply another way of saying we have a materialistic society. Material things are not alive, they're dead. But the necrophile, he's very much like the narcissist, but he also loves everything that does not grow, everything that is mechanical. They even have a desire to transform the organic into the inorganic, or to approach life mechanically as if people were things, and to transform all living processes, feelings, and thoughts into things. Now, when we say that, if you're following anything about the subject of transhumanism, Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum, he wrote a book, came out, I think, in 2015, called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that book is very much connected with transhumanism. They have the idea that we can improve on the creation. That this, excuse me, that the the creation isn't perfect and we can make it better. Of course, these people are atheists. They think that matter, life evolved from matter, and evolution is great. Here we are, but we can do better. And so they've got their plans how to improve on human beings, tinkering with the very building blocks of life, DNA and RNA. So the necrophile, he wants to control, and in the act of controlling, he kills life. He's afraid of life because it's disorderly and uncontrollable by its very nature. Now, one thing that's very interesting about the necrophile is his attitude towards force. And by that we mean his willingness to create a corpse. In other words, to kill. All force is, in the last analysis, based on the power to kill. Now, for the necrophile, they may not want to kill somebody, but only to humiliate them or to take away their possessions. But whatever they do, behind their actions is their capacity and their willingness to kill. The lover of death necessarily loves force. For him, the greatest achievement of man is not to give life, but to destroy it. So, of evil people, Scott Peck, he says, they're narcissistic, they lack empathy, they're extremely greedy, bald-faced liars, they respect only raw power and do not respond to kindness or gentle persuasion. So, what do we have going on today? We have thousands of doctors who are saying that this approach that the governments are taking towards dealing with this so-called pandemic is wrong. But they're not listening. The other side isn't listening. Thousands of doctors, highly placed, credentialed, career physicians, doctors, epidemiologists, they're saying, hey, hold on, wait a minute, we got to discuss this. But nobody's listening. So here we have evil people do not respond to kindness or to gentle persuasion. So, a number of other authors wrote about evil. There is one Polish psychologist. He wrote a book called Political Ponerology. Ponerology meaning the science of the study of evil. His name is Andrew Lobachevsky. And Professor Lobachevsky, he opined, let's say, his study of evil was based on the Soviet Union. This is just like Erich Fromm's study was prompted by observing the behavior of the Third Reich. Lobachevsky observed the behavior of the Soviet leaders and also came to the same conclusion that the entire world is run by psychopaths. Now, a psychopath is another orientation of evil, and the very interesting characteristic of a psychopath is that they have no conscience. All of us, normal human beings, we have a corrective element for our behavior. we have something within, a conscience, that's telling us the difference between right and wrong. That we should do something or we should not do something. And if we do something wrong, our conscience bothers us so that we don't do it again. But psychopaths have lost this ability. They are not connected with conscience at all. For them, whatever they want to do is okay. They have no compunction about lying or any unethical practice. They can do anything to achieve their objective. Nothing is out of bounds. So, beyond that, psychopaths, they lie, they kill, they injure, and generally inflict great suffering on human beings without any remorse whatsoever. You don't have a conscience, you can do whatever you want. So, Dr. Robert Hare is another psychologist. He wrote several books about psychopathy. He created what was called the Psychopathy Checklist, and which is a checklist of where you can understand who is a psychopath and who is not. And in fact, these are not rare people. Although they do not look like some monster, they could be very much the person next door. And in fact, may even be. There's approximately 5% of the population who fall into this category, and they are responsible for creating more of the problems of society than the great majority of the normal human beings. So, the psychopaths, they think the world is made up of givers and takers. And that if they have an opportunity to exploit somebody, to take from them, they are fools if they do not do so. So, their orientation is to take as much as they can, especially if they have the opportunity to exploit you, so that you know, and even if you know that you're being exploited, they're very happy to do that. Another feature of psychopaths, like the other, is their strong will and their desire to control other people. They want absolute control. They want to kill, they want to control people, exploit people. They take pleasure in seeing people suffer. And the psychopaths even find it difficult to believe that anybody could have a valid argument other than theirs. So understand, I'm God, right? I know what's best. And if you have a different opinion, something must be wrong with you. And if you're pointing out perhaps my mistakes, then the mistake must be in you, and I should take care of you. I should eliminate you because you are the problem. So there's we can see from these three orientations a lot of the problems present in the world today. The fact that people need to be locked up unnecessarily in their homes, to wear a mask, for businesses to close, for what reason? The fact that we cannot even discuss these things because you cannot have a valid opinion other than theirs. We see all of these being played out at the highest levels of government in the world today. So this is the psychology of evil. And so then the question becomes, what do we do with this? The one very interesting thing about these people is that they are incurable. The psychopaths are understood. Psychopathy is not considered to be a mental disorder. In other words, mental disorder is something where our psychological processes are not working properly and we can be healed. Psychopaths don't fall into that category. Psychopaths are incurable. In other words, they cannot be fixed. So what do we do? Andrew Lobaczewski, he was pointing out that most of the business leaders and the leaders of government are psychopaths. He called it a tyranny of psychopaths. And in his opinion, these people should be prevented from ever holding office either in a corporation or in a government. Unfortunately, this problem is not being addressed. And one other psychologist, Dr. Cleckley, in his book, Mask of Sanity, he repeatedly stated with frustration that although the psychopaths and malignant narcissists, although these people are creating all of the problems, and that there's a pressing need to address this, that this problem is deliberately being ignored by authorities in all fields, including psychiatry, including the courts, and including government. He calls this a conspiracy of evasion, in which the authorities refuse to address the problem and deal with it. So I question, well, perhaps that's because they're all psychopaths. Therefore, they don't want it to be dealt with or looked at. Could be. So what do we do? If psychopaths, let's say if evil is a turning away from God and moving away from God, we need then to turn toward God. However, we all have free will, and of course we can't force people to become good people. So what do? The rest of us. First of all, we prevent these kind of people from holding office of any kind. And the second thing is understanding how this world works on a spiritual basis. It's not an exaggeration to say that this world is perfect. Now, that's a shocking statement, perhaps, because many people will say, what do you mean perfect? There's so much crime, there's so much suffering, there's so many problems. How can the world be perfect? Again, from a spiritual perspective. And what is that? It's not by accident that people suffer. It's not by accident that I have a problem. There is this thing called karma. Free will generates karma. We have free will, we can make choices, and if we, let's say, if we hurt others, that creates a reaction in which we will have to suffer at some future date. May not be in the same life, maybe in another life very distant from the previous life. when the conditions are ripe, I'll be put into a situation where I will have to suffer the same as I made others suffer. I was raised a Catholic by my parents, and this is one of the big challenges that I had with the Catholic doctrine, that they could not explain why bad things happen to good people. And in the Judeo-Christian religions, they have the same problem. There's one Jew, I think he was a rabbi, Harold Kushner, and his people of his synagogue, they were always asking him this question: why do bad things happen to good people? So he wrote a book of that title, and he came to the conclusion after studying it that, well, God is nice, but he's not all powerful. Therefore, bad things happen to good people. Sorry, this is not correct. Of course, Rabbi Kushner did not understand the concepts of karma and reincarnation. All of us are eternal spiritual beings. We are born again and again and again in this world, lifetime after lifetime, and we carry with us a big bag of karma, of deeds that we have to suffer for, or unfulfilled desires. And when the conditions are right, those situations will be given to us. So if I was a very bad person in a previous life, I may be born as a child starving in Africa or Bangladesh or some unfortunate part of the world. I may be poverty-stricken, ugly, without education, different ways that I could suffer. But there is, but the reality is, this world is perfect. So if we see a problem in the world, we have to understand that what we need to do is change our karma. And this is possible. Karma is not a fixed thing. It is possible to change karma. And what is necessary, or let's say what is required, is that we turn back toward God. In going toward evil, we have turned away from God. But if we want to change our karma, we reorient ourselves and turn toward God. And by doing that, let's say the circumstances of the karma will be changed, and we can change the karma. So we're in a situation now where the godless elements have been in control of the earth for millennia, and they have purposely created circumstances that allow people to become more and more sinful and degraded and to turn away from God. So we could say a materialistic civilization and also an atheistic civilization. Many people, they reject the idea of God. So, there is, however, let's say, a method of changing the karma for everyone. That is called the Yuga Dharma, or the religion for this age of Kali. The present age that we're in is called the age of Kali. It is an age which is most degraded. It is an age in where the earth is given to the demoniac for their purposes. However, there is a short window of opportunity for us to actually change this world and to reestablish a mini spiritual age in which people can become spiritually perfect. That mini spiritual age, many religions say that we are on the threshold of that. That the Christians, they call it the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Even the indigenous religions, they have concepts. They have concepts that agree with that. And also in the Vaishnava faith, there is a concept of this. And the idea that people will be spiritually uplifted. Well, it's not something that's going to happen to us. It's something that we will need to do ourselves. Nobody can force us to become spiritual. We have to do it ourselves. And the process for doing that is made very simple in this age. It's given in what's called the Yuga Dharma, and that Yuga Dharma is to chant the names of God. Any bona fide name of God will do. But specifically what's recommended is the Hare Krishna. Specifically what's recommended is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. If you are in India, perhaps you know about ISKCON. It's a very large organization, or perhaps in other parts of the world, you've seen Hare Krishna devotees chanting on the street. And they're chanting what's called the Maha Mantra, which is composed of the names of God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The specific wonderful effect of this mantra is that by saying it, one becomes free from their past karma. The karma debt is eliminated. And so if we want to change the world, if we can get enough people to take up this chanting, you don't have to believe anything. You don't have to put your lines on your face like I have. Just like medicine, the doctor gives you some medicine, you believe in it or not, the medicine will work. In the same way, this mantra will work if you will recite it, and we recommend at least once a day, recite the Maha Mantra. It will have its effect, and if enough people will recite it, we can change the face of the world. So that's the divine side of divine and demoniac psychology. The divine side is that people turn toward God and become happy. As spiritual beings, we are eternally related with God. We are God-like. We're not God ourselves, but we are God-like. That means persons. And as persons, we are meant to be connected with God. When we are connected with God, we are psychologically happy because we're connected with the whole. We're like a part that needs to be connected with the whole. So that can be accomplished with the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And this is not only something that will benefit everyone individually, but will benefit the entire world as a whole. So I'll stop there. And I don't know if there's any questions in the chat box or anything, but if there are, we can discuss that.
Thank you very much, sir, for beautifully explaining the divine and demonic nature with the current examples, with the perspective of psychologists, various psychologists, Carl Jung to various psychologists have defined this concept in a unique way. We have some questions I would like to put in front of you one by one.
Okay.
First question is, when we talk about psychologist or the mental health professional, So there is a missing, or there is a misunderstanding about the consciousness, and most of the psychologists or the mental health professional, they don't believe in the consciousness.
They don't
So
believe in
what will
what?
be your
Conscious?
consciousness?
Okay.
Yes, yes. Because most of the psychologists in today's era, they only talk about psychology is a science of mind and behavior. So what you wants to advise to them, or if they are not understanding about the consciousness, there will be a big fault in treatment too. And second part of this question is
Let me address that one first.
okay.
Yeah, this is a problem with trying to understand the world from simply a materialistic perspective. That's like, let's say, we see so many cars on the road, right? And we go and we say, wow, amazing. Look at this thing. It goes down the street all by itself. There's so many parts. Look how it's put together, how it's all working. Very wonderful engineering. And we discuss all about the car, but we don't say anything about the living beings that designed the car, that built the car, or drive the car. So that's what the atheist scientists of every stripe, doesn't matter, psychologists or whatever, that's what they're doing. This world is a combination of matter and spirit, and without including the element of spiritual energy, you have a very inadequate way of understanding. You can't properly see how things are working. So it's like the rat in the maze. The rat in the maze, he sees big walls, smells some cheese somewhere, and he's just running through this maze. But the lab technician, he's got a different perspective. He can look down on the maze. He sees where the rat's supposed to go, where the cheese is. When you understand that this world is a combination of matter and spirit, it changes your perspective so you can look down on this material circumstances and see how it's actually operating. So, let's say I don't want the way to, let's say, the spiritual science is understood differently in different religions. The Vedic literature, the Vedas, the ancient Vedas of India, specifically beginning with the Bhagavad-Gita, they explain the spiritual science in a very precise way, much more so than other religions have, at least in my experience, explained this spiritual aspect of this world. So we need, let's say, there needs to be a reorientation. If, let's say, I will say that the spiritual science is not given in sufficient detail in the Judeo-Christian religions in order to be able to understand this. However, the Vedas give very precise information explaining how this world is a combination of matter and spirit. And so I recommend that those scientists who want to understand and how this world is working as matter and spirit, that they approach it from the perspective of the Vedas, particularly beginning with the Bhagavad-Gita. Okay, part two.
Second is similar when we talk about WHO, World Health Organization. So the concept of health in Vedic perspective or Bhagavad Gita's perspective, a concept of holistic health, including the soul or the spirit along with it. When we talk about the concept of health from the background of WHO, so what will be your advice to those organizations who are incompletely treating with the health?
Who are what?
Who are treating health in an incomplete manner without accepting the holistic or the spiritual perspective?
Well, People in a position of authority, they have they cannot just do whatever they want. They're taking a position of authority to guide people in understanding and behavior. They have an obligation to those people. That is an obligation to answer their questions. If somebody comes to an authority with a question, that authority has to either answer that question or help them understand what is the truth. Let's look for the truth together. If we don't understand the truth, let's find the truth. If they do not do this, they are not qualified authority and they should be rejected from being an authority. They disqualify themselves if they ignore these questions. And this is what we see going on in the world today, both in the political sphere and from the perspective of the World Health Organization. Thousands of doctors are saying, hey, we got a lot of questions. Things are not being done properly. Let's talk about this. And they're being ignored. They're being censored. This means that they're not qualified to hold a position of authority. And beyond that, if they will not discuss these things, then naturally the question arises, why not? They're trying to hide something. And from this comes the idea of conspiracy. Okay? They say theory. Well, what else are people going to do? If their authorities do not answer questions, will not discuss the questions, people naturally speculate as to why. It's natural. Everybody does it. And it's not a theory. What else can they do? They can only come up with a theory because there's no discussion of the fact. So either the governments or the health organizations have to fulfill their responsibilities as authorities, or they step down from those positions because they are not qualified to be authority.
Our next question is very similar and very current issue about the COVID. You have mentioned before in your lecture. I or the audience wants to know about, in your opinion, the conspiracy of COVID. Many countries having different views. We have also heard about the president of Tanzania, a country in Africa. He is murdered some days before as he refused the WHO's concept and their theory about. So in your opinion, what you wants to tell to the people of the world about the COVID conspiracy?
What's the question then?
Question is about the COVID conspiracy. In your opinion, it is true or it is false, or what will be your advice to the people during this lockdown?
Okay. In Bhagavad-Gita, Lord Krishna explains that there's two kinds of created people in this world, the divine and the demoniac. The Vedic literature give a long history of the conflict between the divine and the demoniac in this material world. This is an ongoing problem. The demonic elements, they want to control and own everything. And they are always endeavoring to do that. In my spiritual economics book, which, by the way, Samyuk, if you can, is there some place in the chat box you can put that link that I sent you on WhatsApp? Can you do that?
Yes, I will do it.
Okay. So in my spiritual economics book, I trace out the history of political economic control for the purpose of exploiting people. The systems that they use for exploitation and control are hierarchical organizations, such as government, corporations and so on, where one person has the ability to control the actions of hundreds or thousands or even millions of people, like we see in the world today, present governments. They have created such a method of organization to allow them to control the world, and they have been, and not for the benefit of the people. Now, in light of this COVID, there's been a lot of discussion on the internet, people becoming aware of all these different types of control. The financial controls have been there for millennia. Prior to that, there was control by religion. You did not have freedom of religion. You were controlled. You either believe or you're going to die. So these types of controls are there. This is not human civilization. This is a demonic civilization that is controlling the world and has been controlling the world. And if you don't understand that, there's a lot of material now on the internet to help you do so. And you just need to start doing a little search, and you'll come across a lot of it fairly quickly. So what's the present situation? We are approaching the Great Reset, right? Klaus Schwab, the president and chairman of the World Economic Forum, has come out with this book back in June of last year, COVID-19 and the Great Reset. And the thesis of that book is that COVID-19 has created such a problem in the world that we're going to have to change everything. Wait a minute. COVID-19 hasn't done anything, right? It's the political response to COVID that has changed things. Nonetheless, the UN and the World Economic Forum and many of the world leaders, they are saying, oh, we need to reset everything. We need to change everything. They have an agenda. They have an agenda to change the way this world works. They're openly saying they want to change everything, but how, they don't say. If you look at Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, or the Millennium Development Goals, they make it sound like very nice. Yes, we want to help everybody in the world. But the problem is, at the same time, they're destroying the world. Their atheistic, godless approach to life is what's creating the problem. And to find a solution, they have an atheistic and godless approach, which is not going to work. Their approach will simply make matters worse. However, it will give them more control over the people of this world and more control over the resources of this world, which is what they want. That's their agenda. They have a hidden agenda, which is why they will not discuss the questions, the problems, why they will not allow the cures for COVID to even be mentioned. So this disease is not a problem. There's cures. But when you can't mention the cures, then you have to understand that there's a hidden agenda here. And it's not difficult to understand what that agenda is when you understand that these people are evil. They're demonic. And as such, they want more control over the people of this world and more control over the resources of this world. And that's the state of affairs as I see it.
Thank you very much, sir, for showing right perspective about. You have mentioned the Agenda 2030. Very few people on this planet knows these truths. So I would like to pray Lord Krishna that everyone should aware about these types of hidden truths who are against the humanity, who are against the divine nature, and should aware about their life, their health, and their existence too. we are moving forward to our some of last questions. Other one is the philosophy of karma. You mentioned, or the Vedic text mentioned, that what we are in our life, we are because of our karma. Our birth, our place of birth, our intelligence, everything we got in our existence because of our karma. So most of the people don't believe in karma. Most of the people don't believe in the birth after rebirth, or these eternal truth. So what will be your opinion? What will be your advice, or some points how we can bring a faith in those persons about the philosophy of karma, about the rebirth, and so many eternal concepts?
You're breaking up a little bit, so let me see if I understood the question. That many people do not understand or accept the idea of karma, and what can we do to help them further understand these principles? Is that correct?
Yes, they also don't believe in the birth and rebirth process. So
Okay.
how we can bring a faith
Well,
in them? Yes.
If such people want to learn, it's possible. If they don't want to learn, there's nothing can be done. There's no way we can force people to learn and understand. Naturally, people have questions about this world and how it works. We see that people are born in different circumstances. Some have a wonderful life and others have terrible lives. And it's natural to ask the question, why? Why is the world working like that? Or particularly, if I'm suffering, why do I have to suffer? Right? Especially if I have some big challenge in my life, family member dies, I lose my job, I have no money, I become homeless. Why me? Why is this happening to me? The answer to that, these kind of questions, are karma and reincarnation. Now, karma is not something that we did just last lifetime. We are creating karma all the time. And it's easy to understand this principle of karma. In fact, there's many books written about karma. And in this millennium, probably the most well-known book and movie about karma is called The Secret. It's by a Australian woman. Byrne, I think is her name. Marsha Burns, something like that. Martha Burns. In her book and in the video's on YouTube, you can find it. In both of them, she has many different authors explaining what they call the principle of attraction, that we can have anything we want in this life, anything, but we have to learn how to ask for it. So it's true to an extent that we can have anything. More properly stated is all of our desires will eventually be satisfied. Perhaps not in this lifetime, but every desire that we have will be fulfilled. Now, you can learn this principle with something very simple. One way of doing this is you think of 10 things that you want, 10 things that you would like to have, either experiences or items or something like that. You take out a piece of paper, you write them all down, fold up the paper, put it on the shelf, and don't look at it for a year. At the end of a year, you go back to look at it, and without doing anything, simply by the fact that you wrote those things down, you will find at least 4 of them happen without your having to do anything. Automatically. You can be even more proactive with this. When I lived in San Francisco, for example, San Francisco is a place where they have a lot of public transportation. It's not a place where you have to have a car. Very difficult to find a parking place for your car in San Francisco. Well, I lived there and I had a car. And it's a fact. You could drive around the streets for a half an hour or more trying to find a place to park. So one day I thought, well, why don't I just create a parking place? So when I was across the bay, before I left to go back home, I would visualize a parking place waiting for me just as I got on my street. By seeing it coming to me, I set that in motion, and by the time I got to my street, there would be a parking place there. You can do this too. Simple things like a parking place. That's not big karma to create. You're creating that karma in this lifetime. Karma means desire. Whatever you desire. This sets into motion a chain of karma. So, you can do it with little things, like a parking place or whatever else may work for you in your life and your circumstances. But if you see that movie or the video, The Secret, there's many people there that are explaining this principle. You simply desire it, see it as already having been accomplished, and it will come to you if you have the karma. If you desire to be a millionaire in this life, for example, but you don't have the karma from your previous life, you won't get to be a millionaire in this life, but you will get that in some future life. I've got a small book that I just came out with called Change the Karma. It's available on Amazon. You can go to my author page or look for the book Change the Karma. And I explain all of these points in that book.
We have too many questions, but time has its limitations. So at last, I want to ask or I want to know about a conclude remark for today's session. And it is just a beginning of our journey for our session. In future, we will also invite you on various issues, on various topics. So before concluding our today's session, we want a conclude remark along with the guidance to the person who wants to move towards a spiritual life. How she or he can move towards a spiritual life, and what will be your advice to the beginners who wants to become a spiritual in their life?
Begin chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Very simple. Doesn't cost anything. You can do it as a meditation, as a prayer. Repeat that mantra again and again, 16 words. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's a simple way to do it. Then the next thing I would recommend is you get a hold of Bhagavad-Gita by my spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and you read his Bhagavad-Gita. I do have a YouTube channel, and I have many videos there. I'm just creating a series of introductory videos for people beginning their spiritual life, and I call that there's a playlist there for spiritual evolution. You can look for that. And but very simple, you begin with chanting the Maha Mantra as the Yuga Dharma, or what's called the religion for the age.